So it's fair to say he knows his stuff when it comes to delivering in government. He explained to me, first of all, what the Prime Minister means, he thinks, when he calls for the complete rewiring of the British state.
Well, I think what he's struggling with is the fact that there are big challenges facing the state. Right? We all know that public services aren't good enough. There's not enough money to go around. We need to increase productivity. So we need to do things very differently. We need to spend a lot more money on prevention, not as much on cure. We need to find ways to go across departmental boundaries. That's one of the biggest issues.
I want to ask you about this because the idea is that traditional Whitehall, you've got these great big traditional historic buildings all over Whitehall, and inside them people are really only interested in their own department, their own structures, and therefore they're not thinking about the wider problems. Is that effectively the
constitutionally, we are set up with a Secretary of State for each department that has to look after their department. Now, when it comes to things like, imagine improving the health of the nation, right? Now, some people will say, oh, that's for Department of Health. Well, actually, not really. I mean, if we want to tackle obesity, we want to look at how do we get kids more interested in sport and exercise? How do we manage the food issue? All sorts of things.
Agriculture, that's transport, that's education. Yeah,
exactly. So when you're looking at these missions to basically make people's lives better, then they span different departments. So you need all of those secretaries of state to be able to say, okay, I'm going to spend some money on this, some of my department's money, knowing that the credit is going to go somewhere else. And that gets difficult.
Lots and lots of very clever people, as we both know, in Whitehall. But how difficult will it be to, as it were, puncture holes through the traditional silos and join up government differently?
I think it's possible. Yes, because of the way we're constitutionally set up, this is never easy, right? If you can deliver within one department, one of the joys of being in the Treasury, it's a budget. It's yours. You can go there. You've got control of the tax levers, all of those sorts of things. So that makes it straightforward. But as you say, if you're in DEFRA and someone's saying, actually, we want you to do something which has nothing to do with farming and agriculture, but for other reasons, then it gets complicated. So you need strong voices at the centre to bring together everybody. And this is where the Prime Minister's role is absolutely crucial, because the Prime Minister is the one person that can actually ensure that all the Secretaries of State share their toys, to be honest.
And so we've had people on the show in the past saying the trouble is the centre isn't big enough, isn't strong enough. And that's partly architectural. You've got this maze of rooms in Downing Street, this elderly building. And it really needs a much stronger, better resourced centre if these things are going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not at all sure about that. I mean, if that were the case, the Cabinet Office has expanded in size dramatically in the last 10 years since I left. No causal thing there, but no, it's not about size. It's about quality, not quantity. And it's about getting the mix right between the special advisors and the civil servants. And at the moment, to be honest, I think we've seen people bringing in loads and loads of special advisors and not enough very senior special civil servants who really know what they're doing. You've seen with the government, we've got some good political appointments. Jonathan Powell, Liz Lloyd coming in.
Great. Let me ask you about Chris Wormald, the new head of the whole thing, your old job. Yeah. Not somebody most people listening have heard of before. Tell us about him.
So, very experienced Permanent Secretary, been at Education, most recently at Health, managed through the COVID crisis, which, to be honest, one of the most difficult challenges the nation has ever faced. So, really experienced.
He was criticised a bit for that, was he not?
Of course. I mean, if you've been in the Department of Health during COVID, do you think you could come out of it without any criticism? I mean, you'd have to be a saint. And of course, some of the decisions are not made by Chris. There were ministers as well. So I think he is someone the civil servants will respect. He will help bring about that kind of better relationship between ministers and civil servants that I think is needed if we are to get this big reset, to get this improvement in people's lives, which is what the government wants.
This big reset, we're only a few months into the life of this government. What are we to make of the fact that there's a reset already?
I think we're to make of the fact that they may well not have been as prepared as they should have been. Let's be perfectly honest, and they've been out of power a long time. This happens with new governments, that you've got people coming in, David Cameron, Tony Blair, who had never been even a junior minister before they became prime ministers. So, it's hard to get these things going really quickly. And so, the good thing is recognising that it's not working, there are things that are going wrong, and let's make it better.
So there's something badly wrong with our constitutional arrangements in that case. If people are coming in from the outside, so far from the outside, they don't really know where the levers are, how to achieve change. Should there not be a better period of preparation before government for these?
I would love there to be kind of a slightly longer period while we have transitions. That
like the Americans,
make a lot of sense.
A bit like
the Americans, exactly. And I would like there to be a lot more training offered to oppositions to get themselves ready for government. And at the moment, people like the Institute for Government, Blavatnik School of Government do a bit of that, but the take-up is quite low. And I think people feel that somehow it's inappropriate, or, that they can't prepare for government because that's like measuring the curtains. All they've got to do is prepare to win an election. And then, obviously, if they do win the election, suddenly they're in there and they're governing. And it's really hard.
Finally, pros and cons of targets, because again, for a lot of people listening who are half concentrating on politics, good for them if they're only half concentrating. There was the 5 missions, there was the 6 stepping stones, and now we're getting further announcements and targets and missions, and they just get confused.
Yes, and I can understand that. For me, it should really be about outcomes. So, we want to improve educational outcomes. We want people to think that their lives are getting better as perceived by them, the whole life satisfaction measures that we have now. So there's lots of things you could do about getting the outcomes.
So it's right. deliver.
And then it's about, if you've got the right outcome, then working on the delivery side, which people like Michael Barber have done great work on, getting, the right people around the table, and they'll be from the public sector, the private sector, and the charitable sector, social sector, to help understand the different roles that all 3 of those groups can play in delivering the outcomes.
Well, that word delivery is the crucial one. One criticism made of our system of government, including Whitehall, is that it's all focused on legislation. You want to achieve something, eventually you get a bill through the House of Commons, and that's your job done. Whether or not the bill actually changes things in the real world is hardly looked at by an awful lot of people in Whitehall.
I'm afraid that's exactly my view. I mean, the trouble is MPs spend all day, every day in Parliament, and Parliament does legislation. To my mind, there are lots and lots of ways of changing things. The last thing I would do is legislation. It takes a long time. It's clunky. You imagine legislating, for example, about AI. I mean, AI moves so fast that whatever legislation we pass now will be out of date in 6 months, let alone 6 years. So, I would say try and do all of those things you can using the machinery of government, civil service, local authorities, charitable sector, private sector. And if you have to legislate, yes, but think very carefully about it and make sure the legislation is flexible.
And on this government, fair to say, a bit of a muddle so far, but plenty of time for improvement.
Time for improvement, and I think it's fair to say, there have been some big challenges.
Gus O'Donnell, thanks very much indeed for talking to me.
Thank you.